Thursday, October 24th, 2019, Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Roll call.
Ford.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Kays. Brink.
Here.
Oletsky, Dolly, and Dargis Johnson are absent, but we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. First order of business is to approve the September 2019 minutes. Anybody have any corrections, comments? If not, motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. First item on the agenda, Jeffrey Lamont. Item number 19930.
Owner applicant Jeffrey Lamont, representative for Watertown Lodging Ventures LLC, submitted application to construct a hotel on this 3.4 acre lot, Zone C3 Highway Commercial District and GT1 Gateway Overlay District. Said development site, located at 2803 8th Avenue Southeast, is proposed to have a 5-foot grassed landscape transitional yard on the rear north property line, where a minimum 10-foot transitional yard is required. Application was denied based on ordinance sections 210302, which prohibits the design and creation of nonconformities, and 215411, transitional yards requirements. The applicant now appeals these requirements of the current zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this is currently an undeveloped 3.4 acre C3 zone lot pending the development of a fully compliant 4-story hotel structure, the Holiday Inn Express and Suites. However, in the Gateway Overlay District, a commercial use which is located adjacent to a commercial district shall also have a minimum 10-foot transitional yard, compliance with which would simply entail the relocation of the north 11 of the 96 proposed parking spaces. The only pertinent history to be noted so far is the vacation of the north 10-foot drainage easement, which becomes effective October 21st, 2019, and the applicant assures the site will comply with all other C3 and GT1 zoning regulations. I will show you that transitional yard. This is the structure, the hotel, which complies with all setbacks and everything, but in the GT1, we do have an overlay district which shows what we call transitional yards, which are supposed to be greenways.
And the basis for why they can't conform is for what reason?
Well, they have these 9 parking spaces here. And for that, we need a certain width of a drive area, and that forces the concrete out into the green space, an additional 5 feet. So instead of a 10-foot rear transitional yard, they are showing a 5-foot.
Engineering question. If those parking spaces were at a diagonal, would you need as wide a driving lane?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kays, there would still be minimum drive aisle width required. Jill, do you have that information? Do you know off the top of your head how wide that is? Or Brandy? I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know how much, but it is typically narrowed up a little bit as they become diagonal. I don't know as though it would be 5 feet, though.
And I'll chime in. We did look at that option, but as far as the franchise goes, that they do not allow for the parallel and the diagonal did not work still when we looked at that. They still could not comply with the 10-foot rear transitional yard requirement.
You said we, in terms of the drive lane, is this what's the standard? Is it an engineering standard that the city sets, or is this something is it?
The franchise has their own standards, and then the city has our standards.
Okay.
Yes.
Is the franchise more restrictive than the city standard?
We would allow diagonal parking, yes. It is our understanding that the franchise would not allow it. So they would require perpendicular stalls as are shown on this plan.
Is the city requiring them have this many parking spots? Could they just eliminate these parking spots and not have them?
The city requires 94, and with that, those 9, they show 96, so they're only 2 over. But there is area,
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question,
Yeah.
isn't there area to the west, part of this lot that's all green space that could be used for parking?
So there's a plan then there's another site plan that will come in the future to the west where we're actually there, this lot will be split. So there will be a lot line 10 foot off of those parking lots.
And they're looking at having a 10-foot transition zone between those two uses as well?
Yep.
So their letter only says they will not approve or allow our site plan with parallel parking. It doesn't say anything in their letter about diagonal parking.
But still with the diagonal, the driving, they still could not meet the 10 foot. They'd have to encroach within that 10-foot rear transitional yard even with diagonal.
How much? Would it be the 5 foot or would it be
3
somewhere
feet or
between
2
5 and
feet?
10?
That I can't say off the top of my head.
Yeah, we would not have that information unless the applicant's agent would happen to have drawn that up or provided it to us. We didn't perform those calculations internally with staff.
The diagonal makes it hard too because it is two-way traffic. So then they would have to have a one-way situation. Which isn't as convenient. And so
Can the building be shifted south at all, or will it cross into the front yard setback if it's shifted south?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you.
So did the staff in their analysis identify other places where that parking could be located on this site and still meet the minimum requirement parking?
well, at this time, this is the legal description, this entire Lot 5, and this dividing line of their concrete is somewhere about here. And this is the site plan, so all of this over here is empty space, which at a later date, they will come to you with another plan, supposedly, we don't know when, but right now,
Are they looking at creating another hotel adjacent to this?
apparently in the future, yes.
Is there a possibility that shared parking could be done between two, since they're the owners, and that they adhere to the 10-foot rule here, and we deny it, or if we were to allow something here, they could move parking into the other spot, the other property?
It's possible. Again, we don't have the opportunity to view both site plans finished, ready for our processing. We have this one at this time, so it's up to you to review this one at this time.
I'm just going to make a comment. I find the request problematic that we are looking at our first foray into this area in the Gateway Overlay District. I can remember that when the Gateway Overlay District was created, the 10-foot transition zones were there intentional to make this a different approach, a different look than you would see any other C3 zoning district in the community. And based upon, I think we've all understood that, variances, you need to show some sort of hardship, and it shouldn't be a self-imposed hardship. And I find the request problematic.
Do you think this is something too that we should be looking at holistically? Kind of what we discussed last week or 2 weeks ago at the Plan Commission meeting. I had brought this situation up, and just looking at the rear transitional yard as a whole and the fact that there is a 10-foot requirement, is that something that could be lessened and that a 5-foot would be appropriate? Because otherwise too, not having conjoining driveways between properties is also problematic, that it would create islands. And is that necessary?
Part of the intent of the design, again, when the Gateway Overlay District, was to have that separation so that we weren't pushing traffic from one lot onto another lot and then, dumping it out, and because it doesn't fit with your overall transportation flow as well. Because if we're just creating a pavement onto pavement onto pavement, we're not focusing where we want traffic to go. It can go anywhere within that development. And by doing it this way, it was intentional.
Their commercial site plan application would still have to be approved, that traffic flow would work.
But if you allow for pavement on pavement on pavement, people take paths of least resistance no matter how you design or where you think their access points should or shouldn't be. Again, I would say the bigger question is, do we amend or we variance an ordinance on the first crack that you have something that doesn't quite fit? Or do we say time out and you take a look at it from an overall policy standpoint?
Or that you would grant the variance with that premise of
I won't, but
initiating that amendment.
We did have a similar situation to this about 4 years ago, which we did, at that time, the ordinance was actually modified to allow for something similar to this to happen. We actually put it in the thing that a panel of 7 people made up of the mayor, the city attorney, myself, and somebody else, and 3 other alternates could do that. We put that in just for that specific reason, to fast track some of these views, because this was a new subdivision, a new district. And the purpose of that was, at that time, was to allow the intervening of joint parking lots, to allow the crossover parking and shared parking space, which we did do, but the project died, so it never got come to fruition anyway.
so it was never adopted by the planning commission or the city council.
At that time, it didn't have to be. The ordinance stated that all it took was the majority vote of those 7 people to pass that. And that was done again to fast track, so people wouldn't have to spend 2 months going through the process to get something done that made sense in the long run, because this was a new and infinite design that hasn't been tried, because we haven't had that many people out there. So is this the best use or not? So again, we're just getting back to, is does the 10 foot in the rear really make that much sense or not? That, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying that's the question we're asking to decide on. And if it doesn't make sense, then we would only want it to be done with referral to change the ordinance so it does apply.
And just for clarity, Ken, for the record, that board of 7 is what was written into the Gateway Overlay District as the variance board for those requirements. Is that correct? And it was specific to the Gateway Overlay District, though, right? Okay.
But then I think that was taken out due to the aesthetic requirements that were looked at on a previous application within the last couple of years.
It was kind of taken out to take the burden off of me to try to do this, or us, make it be a
Right.
a non-political board that can make that decision instead of being a political board that can make that decision.
Right, but I also think there's problems with that whole approach when the Board of Adjustment issues variances. We're gonna have a public hearing. Yeah.
I was just curious what the difference between 5 or what would be 10 feet between the 2 lots and 20 feet is. I mean, a 10-foot buffer is still gonna stop the flow of traffic, right? I mean,
Well, it wasn't only for stopping flow of traffic, it was also for filtration of, water coming off the property. It was also used just to have green space, so that am I driving down Willow Creek Drive and through the Gateway Overlay District, or am I driving down Highway 212, 81, or 20? I mean, that's the difference.
Opening the public hearing, does anyone here speak on behalf or against this variance request?
If I may just say, we do have in the report, in the middle of the report, the transitional yards and what they're for, 1 through 6.
Mike Lawrence randomly saw this today, so I thought I'd come up. I thought it was exciting that we have somebody who wants to finally build on that gravel pit out there, that eyesore of coming into Watertown. I saw this project and I read in on the 5 feet. Like they were saying, it's in a zone that we have constantly, even with Travs, we had to change things in the zone. It's a new zone. A lot of times with new zones, that's some of the issues you come up with is, hey, we wrote this zone. It's untested. As you see here, this guy's coming into town, building 1, not maybe 2 hotels in our community. And here we are arguing over 5 feet on the back of a building. I mean, this guy's wanting to spend millions of dollars. and bring people. Right now, we're sending people to Brookings to get hotels. Well, when they go to Brookings, they eat at Cubby's. It's just like the ice rink. We don't want to send them out of town. I just kind of think the difference between 5 foot and 10 foot when you're going 30 miles an hour past this behind a hotel. It's conversations like this that get put in the paper, and other developers and other hotel people read and say, Watertown doesn't want us there because of 5 feet. Me as a citizen, I look at 5 feet and think, that's shorter than me. There's still going to be 10 feet between them. So I just think that if we got people that want to come in here and build and spend money and put in housing, that we should probably, at least work with developers, especially in a zone that is completely unproven and obviously hasn't had much development.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Chris Shilkin, Watertown Development Company. To follow up on some Mike's thing, I think this ordinance was put in 2007. Is that correct? Roughly around the time frame. So as we work with people wanting to locate to Watertown, especially in this area, as it's going to be a high traffic pattern once the bypass and all the development happens out there. There are people waiting for development out there, and the hotel, in my opinion, is the first piece of that. So not to be redundant, but for 5 feet for a multi-million-dollar project to get our hotel vacancy rate so we can have people stay here for tournaments and do that, I think this would be worth maybe a relook at the overall variance or the overall ordinance and go with this. Spoke with Julie Knutson to get some statistics. I think our hotels are at 97% occupied. We try to get people hotel rooms here, and they say, don't have any, have to go to Brookings. Just not a good look for, my opinion, for Watertown when we do something like this, when this can help take pressure off of the hotels and overall development in a high traffic area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
Yeah, if I could, to piggyback onto Mr. Shilkin's comments in regards to, I couldn't agree more that if this is entertained by the board and if this were to pass, for staff's sake and the board's sake, I would hope that we would entertain an amendment of this segment of the zoning ordinance and maybe consider reducing that 10-foot rear yard transition yard to a 5-foot. That would just be my recommendation from a staff perspective, that if you were to consider approving this, that we would follow up with the appropriate amendment so it wouldn't be a repeat application in front of you as these areas continue to develop.
Can anyone say with certainty if this is make or break for this development? Do we know that? I see there's no one here from the company that I can ask that question of.
I'm with Scott Engineering, so I'm representing them.
Could you state your name, please?
Glenn Struckman.
Thank you.
I think it may not be entirely a make or break situation, but it's getting ever later, and they do want to start on this fall, so it will definitely stop the project from happening this year if the weather doesn't. And they probably would have to completely redesign the hotel, because if we don't have the number of parking spots required, they probably would have to change the building.
So they chose this lot and they designed this hoping they would get this variance approval, knowing that they were not going to meet our requirements and have to come in for a variance. Is that correct?
No, they didn't realize they had to have the 10 feet. They were under the understanding that there was 5 feet. They were, the Gateway Overlay District was something that they weren't aware of.
Did they ask?
Right. I mean, that seems very
I
odd.
believe they did.
With a multi-million-dollar project, that you wouldn't look at all of the issues involved in the design.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can chime in. The staff encouraged preliminary discussions on this project, and for whatever reason, we did not get any conceptual or preliminary discussions carried out with the applicant or their agents. But typically, you're exactly right. We would want to vet the requirements fully with the applicant so they would know what's expected upon the time of submittal. And unfortunately, this was not caught until the submittal was received by the building official and the urban planner, and they realized quickly that the Gateway Overlay District requirements were not met, and that's what then spurred this discussion and this application that's before you today.
Thank you.
Which at that point too is when looking at the Gateway Overlay District and not being here when it was adopted or being looked at, I questioned the 10-foot rear yard myself. And if that is necessary. I mean, 10-foot side yard and rear yard, transitional yards really does eat up a lot of the lot space for somebody to develop on. They have their structure setback still, but that's just, you know, and we want it to be aesthetically pleasing and to have the green space, but maybe it's something we could look at to where we, when amending, if we would amend the ordinance, that we would have additional requirements for green space within the interior to make up for that. But with it being in the rear yard, it's just not as visible. Anyway.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Lot 7 to the north looks like it's an extremely large lot. Is there any plans in the works of that subdividing somehow, or a street going through there? Or, I mean, that one, it just doesn't look like that lot will be completely filled if, you know, I just almost wonder if there won't be more green space there. I mean, not that that really affects this particular property, but I was wondering if there was any streets or anything else that was going to be built in this development, I guess, is my question.
And that could be further subdivided, but actually what you're getting with this lot, Lot 5, is large as it stands too. So as they are splitting it, you are getting that same effect where they're adding additional side yard requirements that wouldn't be there if it were just one lot.
Brandy, say that again for me. So when they subdivide this lot, then they'll each have the 10-foot side yard? So we'll have 20 feet?
Yep.
And what is the length of the north property line after it's subdivided?
It's like 260 feet.
From the
red to the corner.
From red line to the back the road is 200 and.
Jill, maybe you just want to measure it on GIS because it wasn't on the site plan. This is a guesstimate.
I'm not entirely sure. Does it split it exactly in half?
You're about right there.
Yeah, 263 feet. I do remember seeing that number somewhere. So from here to here, it's about 263 feet.
Anyone else to speak in the public hearing portion?
Mike Lawrence again. Just to make sure I'm understanding right, you're going to be gaining twice as much green space when they split the lot?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. But you're going to be gaining 10 more feet on the other side. Because you have 10 foot on this lot, you're going to have 10 foot on the next lot. So by them splitting one lot from the original, you're actually gaining that much more green space. 10 feet by 263 feet. You would be gaining that in green space.
But the variance is actually on the north side, so I mean the north side will stay. I mean that was supposed to be 10 foot on both sides, so it'll be less up there because it'll be.
So the math is half.
But he's getting at that'll be administratively platted after to figure out what they need to include for easements.
I understand. Or they come for another variance.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in the public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Board discussion, any other questions for anyone?
I understand. I'm an advocate of development in this community, and anyone who would say elsewise, they don't know me. But I also know that there's intent to policy that's vetted through a public process. And we have always talked to people about when is a variance necessary, when is a variance required, and when do you grant variances. In this situation here, it's apparent to me that either they bought too small of a lot to do what they want to do, or their design is not adequate. Is there compromise that could be made? Possibly. I do think that if a variance is granted, I think we as a board, we owe it to change the rules to not have to hear future variance requests. Because a variance is nothing more, they call it a relaxation, but you're bending the rule to make something fit. And in that, it might be all right in this situation. Would you put up the sketch plan, please? To possibly save face, and the only thing that I would support would be a 10-foot rear transition route for the entire stretch of the north property line, with the exception of the area just north of the parking alleys. So it'll be beveled. 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet where the parking is, restricts to 5 feet. That allows them to maintain their driving lanes in that area, and it maintains at least 35% of that north property line is still at the 10 feet until we decide to change the rules. I think it's more appropriate to change the rule and then apply the right rule as opposed to establish rules and then bend the hell out of it to make stuff fit. That's just my philosophy.
So just to understand your point, so east and west of the parking,
The pylon area that comes up on the east and west of the north parking ramp, parking area, could you point to that where you got the cement that comes out on the corner? 10, we're still at 10, we're at 10, we're at 10, keep going. Keep going, oh, stop, back up a little bit to the east, there. There you go, 5 feet, all the way to there, 5 feet, but then we got 10 feet on the other ones. So you're still saving some face, adhering to the policy, allowing the developer to do what they want, and then we can come back as a planning commission, wearing a different hat, to make a recommendation to the city council to change the ordinance if that's what we decide to do.
that seems awful reasonable to me. It accommodates what the developer wants and doesn't, blow the, guidelines to smithereens.
I think we do need to have a bigger discussion moving forward on what that rear yardage should be. If we're comfortable with 10-foot side yard requirements, and we have a 25-foot front yard, and if 5 feet on both adjoining properties gives us our 10, and we're fine with that, that's fine. I just as soon do it more through a legislative process as opposed to an administrative quasi-judicial process.
So Jill, the way that Todd just described it, then that would not impact the development in any fashion. That may need to.
The development of the building, it wouldn't impact at all, and it would, the way I understand it, it doesn't impact any drive aisles either.
I think you might lose a parking spot.
But he's got 2 to give.
He's got 2, yeah.
Just a little less concrete.
And just for clarity, Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask for that point of clarity that Jill just made. We would want to require them to sustain the minimum drive aisle width of 24 feet, correct? Is that what Commissioner Kaye's intent was there?
Which it looks like it is to the east and west of the parking area. Looks like there's that corner there that would end up being a little bit narrower there on the corner. But since I'm not backing out, and I think that's probably why you want that 24 feet when they're backing out more than traffic going 2 different ways there, on that corner, you can still make the corner, unless you're driving a semi, I suppose.
If she wants to say something, I got to open up the public hearing.
You can't open up the public
I'm not going to make a comment. I'm just going to ask you not to take action. The Economic Development Director's talking with the owner on the phone right now and asked you not to vote until, because he might want to make a comment. And it's the owner couldn't be here physically today to speak for himself, so.
I think if we could find a way to make it work where it's the least amount of being uncomfortable on both sides of the equation, that's what we could try to do here. And that's my compromise.
Would throwing in diagonal parking help?
I think basically what Brandy and Heath said, it's really, that's not a non-issue. I don't think we're going to find 5 feet in diagonal parking in that area.
So Joe, from your understanding of Todd's explanation, would that accommodate this plan with some very modest accommodations on behalf of the developer?
I believe it's a pretty good compromise if you want to compromise it.
Could we, Mr. Chair, I would ask you to maybe open up the public hearing, to reopen it to allow Mr. Shilkin to come and talk to us.
We didn't notice for 2 public hearings.
What? Oh, you're funny.
All right, we're going to reopen the public hearing for Mr. Shilkin to speak.
Sorry about that. Chris Shilkin, Watertown Development Company. Was just talking with Jeff on the phone, and it would potentially kill the project. However, he said to check with, is it Glenn? Right. About your proposal, Todd, to see if that would work.
The room, did you hear the proposal that I made to?
Yep, 10 feet, 5 feet, 10. Yep. And so I ran that by him, and he said if Glenn is okay with that, he thinks that would work. So, but if not, like what Jeff does is, I mean, they have projects stacked up, and if this one misses right now, their time to build it, then it could be a couple of years or possibly not.
So Glenn, what do you say?
I think it sounds like a good idea. I think it sounds like a good idea. I would just, I would just like to ask to maybe give the staff a little discretion for the transition so that it's not abrupt coming out of the parking.
Gradual.
Yeah, so we can make a gradual transition from where the parking is to where the aisle is, so that we don't have any part that's doesn't have the full
So we're not just
24
going
feet.
10, square
Right.
5. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other consideration too, Mr. Chairman, that we would want to give to this is access for fire apparatus and things of that nature. We would want the fire marshal to review the final design dimensions as well, just to make sure that any circulation around the site that he may need is appropriate for their codes as well.
All right.
Mr. Chair, you ready for a motion?
I am ready for a motion. I got to close the public hearing.
Yes, as soon as you do that.
Close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve a modified variance request where the applicant will adhere to the 10-foot rear yard or transition yard requirement, with the exception of the area noted between the northern parking spaces on the map in question. This is really difficult. And working with staff to find a gradual transition from the 10 feet to the 5 feet, in the area behind the parking, subsequent to fire marshal approval. Does that cover that, Heath?
Yes, I believe so, for the intent that we would need to give a final review of it.
My recommendation would be that if staff would want to insert the footage requirements in that motion afterwards, so we know exactly what we meant. The easterly 185 feet and the westerly 65 feet, or whatever that number is in the motion.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Unless you want to do a roll call.
I didn't want to. Motion passed.
Todd, thank you for that out-of-the-box thinking.
That's why we love him. All right, so that motion passed with the notations on the variance. Next item is open the public comment. Anything on the, anyone that wants to speak here on any item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, close the public comment. Any old business?
Nope.
Anybody have anything? All right, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion
I would never have voted yes for that.
Yep.
All right, ready to rock. I'd like to call the Thursday, October 24th, 2019 Watertown City Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Ford.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Kays. Brink.
Here.
And Aletsky, Dolly, and Darkitz Johnson are absent. We have a quorum.
All right, I'd like to announce to anyone an invitation for public comment of anyone that would like to speak later in the meeting, have any item that's not on the agenda. Like to have the agenda approved. Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion. So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Agenda approved. Approval of the minutes from the October 10th meeting. Actually, I have a comment on that myself. They got me written down as absent. In fact, I was here. So if we can make that notation.
Sounds good. Will do.
Second as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passed, moving along. Commission consideration of resolution number 2019-31.
Thank you, Mark. So this is the plat of 8th Avenue Southeast and 26th Street Southeast of East Park's second edition. So you'll remember this plat has came through before as East Park second edition, and actually it includes the lot that we just discussed at the Board of Adjustment meeting. So what this plat is doing is just formally dedicating this right-of-way. It formerly existed as H lots, and so that's when the streets were installed, which H lots are used for highway purposes, but it was privately owned. So then the private owners conveyed the property to the city by deeds, and then the city platted it to formally dedicate it as public right-of-way. 8th Avenue has been approved. The warranty period is up, and so it is formally approved. And then 26th Street Southeast, the warranty period will be starting here. Should go to council in December, we're anticipating. So this is just a formality of dedicating the right-of-way.
You know, we could have took 5 feet of sliver off this, let them shift their building down. We would have had done a variance.
But then we would have not had 66 feet of public right-of-way.
Well,
Then we would have had another issue. We wouldn't have followed the preliminary plan.
well, we just wouldn't be adhering to a different section of our ordinance.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just to back up from Randy's comments. Again, this is more or less a cleanup item. I don't know the details on why this wasn't platted as right-of-way initially, but for whatever reason it was not. It was platted as H tracks, as Brandy described, which then were conveyed to the city by deed, and we've now obtained through the city attorney's office. And this just kind of clears things up, cleans things up for this area, and gives us the formal right-of-way.
Okay, nothing other than we're rubber stamping this? I mean, any other questions or comments? All right, then I guess we just need
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Opening up the public comment. No one here to speak on the public comment section, so we'll move on to new business.
So I just put this on here as the 2019 South Dakota Planners Association recap. We had our conference, our annual conference in Brookings last week, Wednesday and Thursday, and it was it was a great conference, good sessions. I think that anybody that attended found value in it, other than the accommodations maybe. But I just wanted to put it on you guys' radar for upcoming dates. We will be foregoing a 2020 South Dakota Planners Association conference, and then instead we're going to join with the Western Planners Conference, which is going to be held in Bismarck, North Dakota. So if you are a member of the association, then we will be looking at doing some match fees or actually just contributing some reimbursement towards people's registrations, being that it is the Western Planners, so it is a bigger conference of more entities. So it'll be probably a more expensive conference, but we'd like to support them. So we're gonna, and then in 2021, we're gonna bring it back to Rapid City.
Is it the 25th and 26th of August next year?
24th through the 26th. Oh, actually, maybe 26th through the 28th.
I thought the 28th was involved in
Yeah,
that date.
Yeah. Just
The Western
keep that
Planners
week
are
open.
very, it's a conglomeration of everything from South Dakota all the way over to Washington and down to New Mexico. And so you get a very interesting cross-section of what's going on in different parts of the United States. And you'll see a lot of commonalities, but you'll also get to see some interesting differences. And so usually about every 3 years, 4 years, they get to South Dakota, North Dakota. So it's usually a very good, very well-run conference.
Wasn't the Spearfish one
3 years ago, I think.
combined?
Yeah,
And that was excellent.
Yep.
It was so interesting.
Yeah. So it'll be nice. It's close enough for all of us being in Bismarck. This year it was in Santa Fe. So yeah, a little better location. But I just FYI.
Wasn't there some kind of a well-known person that was going to be speaking next year? At the
Todd Kays.
infamous or famous? Anyway, there was a mention of somebody that was well-known who's going to be speaking at that concert. I can't remember who it was now, but
No, not that I can think of either.
All right, any other new business?
I would just like to instruct staff to come back and take a look at that transition zone, maybe piece together some of the reasons why we've got it, maybe come back with some recommendations if for us to consider. I think one thing is I would still like to see some green in there because we developed it that way 12 years ago. Whether it's 20 feet of green space back there or if it's 10 feet, what have you, maybe we could come back and just have a conversation on that.
Sounds good. Definitely do that.
While I have the mic, I also want to put a plug in for the Tim Layfield Memorial Jam this weekend at Dempsey's. 15 bands. Heath Boys are going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun.
PaperAvenueMusic.com.
Yeah, well, just, shameless
Everyone
motion.
like and subscribe.
Any other new business? Any old business?
Nope, none that I have.
Okay. Do we require an executive session today?
Nope.
Take a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.